the Remington podcast, where we take a deep dive into all things ammunition. I'm your host, Audrey Mays, and today I am joined by Team Remington pro shooter Dustin Sanchez.
How's it going?
Once again, favorite.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, but this time we're here in the Remington factory.
We are. Yeah, this is my first time here. It's cool so far.
Yeah, it's going to be great. You're about to go on a factory tour. That's going to be
I'm
awesome.
excited. But I get to be in the cool room. I got the cool neon light behind me.
Yeah, a bunch of fanfare.
I love it.
Everywhere. So we are going to dive into PCC because that's what you've been really getting into these days.
Yeah, that's all I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still shooting some long range because it's fun and I want to keep, those are diminishing skills. Mm-hmm. But PCC is where I'm putting all my time into right now.
That's where your heart's at.
Yeah.
I got
it's
that.
fun.
And you just came from Texas.
Yeah.
You shot a PCC match.
Yeah, I was down in Navasota, just south of College Station. Mm-hmm. I shot a 8-stage match. What'd you say?
I said whoop.
Whoop. Wasn't the Longhorns, but I guess we can go with the A&M.
Wow, that was gross. Yeah.
So I went down there. Corey K, one of my good friends, and he's a JP shooter with me. He put on a one-day match, trying to get everybody that's going to IPSC Worlds ready. And so I went down there and shot my first PCC match, and man, it was a blast.
Mm-hmm. So let's start off by saying, what is PCC?
Yeah, PCC is Pistol Caliber Carbine. So typically what you're going to see is 9mm and an AR type platform is the most common thing. There are some variants out there. So you'll see the SIG, like the SIG MPX.
Okay.
But for the most part, it's a semi-auto long rifle shooting 9mm.
Mm-hmm. And the criteria for guns that you can shoot here, does it have to have a 16-inch barrel? Is that the
No,
rules?
it does not. Mm-hmm. You can run SBR, also known as a short-barreled rifle, or you can run, 14.5 with the pin and weld. Mm-hmm. You can also, 16-inch, 18-inch. It really depends. I don't know anybody running 18-inch, but I'm sure if you wanted to run it, you could. The only deal with the SBR, the problem that you run in with SBRs is if you're traveling all over the country, you then have to let every state know that you're coming into that state with an SBR, and they have to approve you to be there.
Okay.
So then you start dealing with some more, just letting more, having, I guess, law enforcement more involved in what you're doing. That's my reason why I've stayed away from shooting an SBR in competition, just for that. But if you're going to run an SBR and you're doing a lot of base stage style matches, so, really up close, kind of shooting in and out of ports. And SBR is awesome because you can throw a 10.5-inch barrel on there. You can go in right in there. Your hand's right there. You're shooting. You can move in and out, and it's pretty nice.
A lot of control, easy to move.
It is. Yeah. But I run a 14.5-inch pin and weld. But most of my firearms that are going to be used, whether it's a 3-gun, home, self-defense, for the house, whatever it is, and even my PCC, most of those are 14.5-inch.
Okay.
I like to run the same handguard on all of them, so pretty much all I shoot is a JP rifle. So for the AR platform, and they all run the same handguard, same grip, same trigger, same stock.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, they feel everything weighs about the same, and I can go from my ultralight 308, which is 14.5-inch, to my 223, to my PCC, even my 22. And I can train with all of them and have a good time. And it's, they're all very familiar with me.
Yeah, it's all about the same weight. So when you switch over, it's not that much of a difference.
Exactly. Yeah. In this match, I could have shot in the morning. I could have shot 8 stages in the morning and then 8 stages at night.
That's a lot.
It is.
For people who don't shoot, that's a lot.
It is, because it was almost 360 rounds for in 5 hours. 8 stages. They were fast. Some of them were fast stages. Some were a little longer. But I could have shot 308 in the morning, and I thought about it. I just didn't want to fly with the 308.
Right.
And that ammo is just heavy, and it's kind of a pain to fly with all that.
Yeah.
But I could have shot 308 and then went to PCC, and I would have never known the difference except for recoil from the 308 to my PCC.
Right, that makes sense. What are some restrictions that you have in like a PCC match versus a regular rifle shooting match?
Yeah, well, if we look at, we get into USPSA, IPSC, those are like the 2 big organizations that are going to be running a lot of PCC. And with those, really it's power factor, which is the velocity of your bullet, of your projectile, times the weight of, the grain of your projectile, divided by 1,000. So you want to meet power factor. So every time you get into USPSA, whether you're going to shoot a PCC, a pistol, whatever, they're talking about power factor.
Okay.
And you have to make power factor. And what they did that for was some guys were, back in the day, they started to hand load. And they were hand loading their rounds to be very, really slow, not a whole lot of power. And they were trying to reduce recoil by loading very small grain with, very little powder so it doesn't move.
Trying to get like a centerfire 22. Basically.
Exactly. And you see that in Steel Challenge. And in Steel Challenge, you don't have a power factor rule.
Okay.
So if you shot PCC in Steel Challenge, you can reload your own stuff. And that's why some companies are making barrels that are 5.5 inches long. And then they pin and weld an aluminum shroud to them to take it to 16 inches. But you can run the same load out of your pistol that you run in your PCC, and you never get a squib. So if you're not familiar with a squib, that's where your projectile doesn't make it all the way out your barrel.
Right, just kind of ploops at the end.
Well, sometimes they don't even make it out.
Okay. I've never heard of that. That's crazy.
Yeah, so I've seen it. We've had, I've seen a barrel that had 23 rounds stacked in it. The guy just kept pulling the trigger, and he's like,
Did he not notice?
Yeah, I get, apparently not, no. And then all of a sudden it jammed on him. And then he found out, he's like, when he sent it in, he was like, well, there's only, I have a squib in there. And then when we looked in there, we're like, no, we knew there was one at the end of the barrel. We knew there was one at the front. Excuse me. So we were like, let's cut the barrel open.
Right.
So we cut the barrel in half, and they were stacked from front to the back.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah. So restriction-wise, you're just looking for, power factor. And if you can get that, you're good to go.
Okay, that's awesome. What is some, benefit to shooting PCC? I know some people who shoot 3-gun maybe don't really enjoy PCC shooters. So what is some benefits that you can see?
What I like about PCC is that, like I said earlier, that my 308, my 223, to my PCC, they all match. So if you're a guy like myself that truly likes to shoot 308, that gets pretty expensive to go out and train with that. But I can go to my 9mm and I can run my 9mm in the same style base stages, do barricade training, work on in and out of ports, whatever, with my 9mm, and it's way cheaper, which is really what I like. And you see that same type of training technique being done in long range, where they'll run a 22 long rifle to replicate their 6 Creedmoor or their 6.5 Creedmoor.
Right. They're just ready for that different recoil, basically.
Exactly. But for me now, I look at PCC, and I can go shoot a number of matches all over. I'm in Minnesota, and I can shoot matches I can shoot probably 4 matches a week.
Oh, wow.
And shoot PCC from a 3-gun match that allows me to run 1 gun or even 2 guns. So sometimes they'll let me run a pistol in the PCC, and they just put me in 2 gun to a straight up PCC match.
Right.
And so there's just a lot of training. There's a lot of stuff out there. And if you're somebody that just wants to really work on your, your footwork, your technique, in and out of positions, and still be able to go compete in 3-gun, but have that kind of go back and forth, shooting PCC is a blast. Yeah.
I actually saw when I shot my 3-gun match, I saw that a lot of people who were beginners shot just PCC and shotgun, which, like you said, was 2-gun. But do you see a lot of beginners doing this?
Yeah, especially because a lot of people have Glocks at home. And so most PCCs, not all, but most PCCs take Glock mags.
Okay.
So, I can have a Glock pistol at home and have 10 mags for that. And I can load them up with, I run 115 grain, but I could shoot 115 grain out of my pistol and turn around and run 115 grain out of my PCC and never have to be playing around with 2 different loads or carrying 2 different types of ammo. I just throw a couple boxes of 9mm in my bag and go to the range with a Glock and a PCC and have a good time.
And you know that 115 is going to run through that mag.
Exactly.
The way that you think it's going to.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
What, for people who want to get into PCC, what is probably the biggest drawback or the hardest part about shooting PCC?
Well, the first thing you're going to see in PCC is finding a rifle that's just reliable. That's been the biggest issue with PCC over the years, is just finding rifles that will run and run the entire match.
Okay.
And whether that's a 1-day match or a 3-day match, just finding something that will run. So that's I'd say that's probably your biggest drawback is that part. After that, you know, it's just getting used to running. And this is coming from, you know, cutting my teeth in 3-gun to now being
right.
I don't look at running through a course of fire with an AR as being difficult, but I didn't start shooting pistol or anything. I just shot 3-gun, so I was used to that. But I would say if you're getting into PCC and you haven't really shot any other type of competition, or let's say you're coming from long range to shoot PCC, it's going to be getting used to running with an AR in your hand,
right,
and moving in and out of position as fast as possible.
It's this big clunky thing as opposed to this little compact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you see guys, you know, I started doing it, but I've been training for it, is sprinting from, you know, point A to point B, one-handed with the AR and trying to make sure I'm not breaking the 180,
right,
keeping it in a safe direction. That was just drills all by itself, was practicing moving with the PCC as fast as possible.
Makes sense to me. I mean, like we talked about last time, footwork.
Yeah.
Like it's all about footwork.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are some restrictions that you might have in your handgun? Like, do you run a muzzle brake or?
Yeah. So I run a compensator. So on pistol, if you run a compensator on your pistol, then you're going to be put in a different division. So in USPSA and IDPA, there's a bunch of different divisions, whether it's open, limited. I mean, they even have a revolver division. Which
wow.
Yeah, it's a small division, but they have one.
I was like, I've never even seen one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anytime you make changes, whether you put a dot on top of your pistol, that moves you into a different division. With PCC, however, you show up in USPSA, PCC is PCC. So if you have a compensator, you're going against guys that may decide like they don't want to run a compensator. Doesn't matter. You know, if you just show up with your PCC, you're going to shoot your PCC.
You won't get shoved in another division.
No, but if you show up to a steel challenge match to shoot USPSA or to shoot PCC, sorry, they have irons.
Okay.
And optics. And so optics is going to be a red dot. Typically, some guys will run a 1 to 6, 1 to 8 on there. Very rare. And then you have irons,
which is just open sights.
Yeah.
Well, iron sights.
Well, your iron sights. Yeah, exactly. So that's the only place you're really going to deal with 2 different divisions. But USPSA, IPSC, you just show up, and even IDPA, yeah, you just show up to those. You got a red dot on there. You're going. Whoever's in that division, you're going. So I run 2 red dots. I run a compensator on mine.
2 red dots is in one on top, one at 45?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay, very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was allowed.
It is, yeah. And that was a whole thing because I shot for like a month. I ran my PCC for a month with the offset. And I noticed every time I was transferring over to my offset, I was kind of having to bury my head a little bit more. So then I went and scoured the internet for a riser, and I put my offset on top of a riser. And now, and the whole purpose of that was to be, cheek well in my position, and I can rotate, and I'm not having to move my head.
You don't have to move, yeah.
Yeah, my eye position was the same. Yeah, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of having offsets because in all the divisions I shoot, you can't have them.
Right.
So for me, it was something different. So I knew when I put an offset on here, there was going to be a lot of training. Just like, my footwork, that was a lot of training, shooting offset and going from, target A to target B and transitioning. And then playing with zeros. Did I want to run a different zero on them? Or did I want to run the same zero?
Yeah.
So
I feel like that would be really helpful too. Like, especially you have to bend down and like shoot sideways.
Yeah. Yeah, so you
help with that. Yeah.
You shot some 3-gun.
I did.
And so there are some targets that are more difficult. Like it's a difficult presentation. So trying to get in there, get on target can be difficult. That 45 degree, you can rotate it, and by rotating it, it positions your body in a kind of a different area with the rifle in a different area, and you can actually take those harder shots.
That's nice.
Yes, it is nice. And then, of course, then you got to deal with zeros. And I tried 2 different zeros on there. Ultimately, I came back to running the same zero. And then from there, I played with a 15-yard zero, 25-yard zero, and I ended at a 50-yard zero for both of them for my PCC. So, yeah, it's just a lot of shooting.
Just
and
like trial and error, I guess.
It is. And what I ran into was that I run 50-yard zero on a lot of my rifles.
Okay.
And so then going into PCC, running 15, then doing 25, my offsets were a little off. My just where I knew my point of impact would be was different. And then I was like, why am I questioning myself when I'm on the clock? Why don't I just go back to a 50-yard zero, which is what I run.
Right. Normally.
And be confident. Correct. So I called a good friend of mine who's really one of the top PCC shooters in the world. And he runs a 50-yard zero for the exact same reason. And I was like, oh, perfect. All the guesswork is done, right? Like, let's go back to 50. Let's just confirm everything, make sure most of it within, 75 yards and in is pretty good. For PCC, you don't really shoot that far out. There's one match where you've got to shoot out to about 130, 140 maybe, but that's very rare to see.
Right.
So most of my targets can be 75 and in.
And at that point, you just need to know where to place the red dot, essentially.
Exactly.
On that far out of a target.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into what I know everyone came here to hear about, which is the ammunition side of it.
Yeah.
I know that you run 115 grain 9mm.
I do. Yes.
And you talked a little bit about power factor. But other than that, what's important to you when you're looking for ammunition for PCC?
Well, I think it's the same thing, right? That even with we talked last time about long range, it's about having an ammo, that just runs.
Right.
At the end of the day, I need something that is going to run. With power factor, I could get kicked out of the match if I'm under power factor. So I need something that I know that when I show up to a major match or even a local, whatever, and they come and check me for power factor, that my ammo is very reliable and that my velocity is always going to be the same. Because velocity is really where they're going to hit you on, right? Because they chrono your ammo.
Okay.
And so I need to make sure that my ammo is going to be consistent on velocity throughout the entire day. So I think for the 115, I had, I don't even know how many cases I had at home. I just grabbed a box out of each one. And then I loaded up 31 rounds and 7 different mags. Okay. And I went and I chronoed every mag. And I came up with the same power factor all the way across the board. That let me know that no matter what match I go to, no matter where I'm at, that my Remington ammo was going to make sure I hit my power factor. Then when we come down to a cycling, point, they're all the same velocity. So I was good there. So I knew reliability wise, they would cycle. And I run a JP5, and a JP5 you can adjust your they're called locking pieces, and so I can adjust those based on how my rifle cycles and how fast my ammo is, and so you can go from 120 degree down to a 60 degree. So what it is, it's a roller delayed system, very similar to the LMP5. You can actually take the parts out of that and put them into an LMP5, and so it's just delaying how long the bolt stays closed. Okay. And bleeds off. And so I went to a 60 degree, and the 60 degree is just a degree that it's cut. Okay. And by my ammo saying, my 115s are, 1,160 feet per second across the board. That allowed me to know that I can run a 60 piece be very confident running a 60 piece, and everything's going to cycle just fine, and that rifle's going to stay as flat as possible.
So you need that pressure for the blowback so it will cycle. That's what that 60 degrees for?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because it lets it bleed off for a little bit, and then it opens up.
Is that to reduce recoil? Okay.
Yeah, so it shoots flat, very flat. I was doing tests on a 15-yard target where I was just setting the handguard on my palm, wasn't gripping it, just setting it there, wasn't gripping the trigger, just had it shouldered enough, and I was just hitting the trigger. And it wasn't moving, it was staying on target. And I was just kind of watching the dot where it would go, and the dot would go up and then settle right back down. And it wasn't, all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you need to hit a target multiple times.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, at the match I shot this past weekend, we had a couple of 50 and 60 yard targets. And I ran, the same thing. It's just everything was across the board great. I've had people ask me why I wasn't running bigger grain or a larger grain projectile. And I think it was just the fact, when I was talking to you and we were looking at some stuff, I had 115s laying around. It was like, I'm going to go with 115, see if they meet power factor. And I got my rifle tuned for that. And at that point, it's like, I don't really want to change at this
Right.
point. I know what the rifle does. I know how it runs. I know how it cycles. I know my ammo for, the cases of ammo I have is good. Why would I change at this point?
And so why would people are asking you, why don't you run a heavier grain? Why would someone run a heavier grain?
Yeah. So typically what you'll see is like there's mag extensions that can go onto your Glock magazines. So going with a heavier projectile, usually they're a little flatter on the nose. So they're not loaded as long.
Right.
So they're going to cycle way better there.
There's nothing to grip onto or like get caught.
Yeah. But then also they're slower. So if you want to reduce recoil, you go with a heavier grain. They're slower. So they're not going to, you don't have to deal with a whole lot of that recoil. That's pretty much what you're going to see is that they can still make power factor, go with the slower projectile. But the real benefit that I see to it, especially on the JP5, is that they're not loaded as long, so they feed through the magazine very reliably. But I'm running a Magpul 50 round drum, and my 115s feed right through there. So I'm like, I don't need to change.
I don't need to be bigger.
I'm good. I've got 2 50 round drums. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So you run the 115 in like, I know that we have 9mm in 147 and 124.
Exactly.
So it's the same reason why someone would jump to a 124.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guys that run 147 and 124. A lot. Like I said, if I would have started out with that and got everything going, I probably would never have changed. But I started with the 115s. It's like, okay, they run. I meet power factor. They work in all of my magazines. There's no need for me to change at this point.
Yeah. And you said that, correct, I don't remember the number, but 360 rounds in 5 hours. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of loading.
So, but, I mean, yeah, your thumb has to hurt from loading those mags, right? What, the recoil was fine for you, though, with those 115s?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and a lot of that comes down to, just the whole system is tuned together from the ammunition I run to the rifle, to the optics, everything's just tuned in. But I spent, a lot of time making sure getting everything where it needed to be. When you go to a match or when you get in any type of competition shooting, most of that match takes place before the match, right? Like, it all takes place at the range, at your home range, training, putting rounds down range, going to the gym, working out, your nutrition, especially going to Texas. That was 106 degrees.
Yeah.
When I left Minnesota, it was 75. There was a big difference. So nutrition really came in on that one. I'm not going to lie.
And water intake.
A lot. Yeah. But getting that rifle tuned that when you get there, shooting 360 rounds in 5 hours, the biggest thing I dealt with was my rifle was getting really hot. And so I had a spare shirt. I'd just get it wet and kind of set it down on the rifle and then put a bag over it and just let it cool down. But that was the only issue I had. I didn't have any failures to feed, failures to cycle, anything like that.
No mechanical failures.
No, everything ran perfectly fine. I hit power factor, so all was good.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, like, the last thing you want is to mess up because you're not feeding. Like, exactly. I want it to be my fault.
Yes.
Not the gun's fault. You know what I'm saying? Not the ammo's fault.
Yeah. I ended up taking 5th place. I lost the second place. The guy who took second place beat me by 10 seconds. And I had 10 seconds in penalties.
Oh, dang.
And I was like, cool. I'm fine with that because I know where I messed up, right? There were some other little things I could have changed to do better. Right. But when you can look at one penalty and be like, okay, I know why I messed up. And I knew as soon as I pulled the trigger, I was like, oh, yeah, that's a penalty. All right, let's move on. You're like, it's fine. And then you just have to go because you can't dwell on it, Exactly. Yeah. Yep, exactly. That's awesome, though. That's a good show. Yeah, I was happy with it. It was 5th out of 30, and then I took 20th out of 133 overall. Okay, very nice. Yeah, so my first outing, my first competition with it, I was happy. Yeah. So super competitive PCC then. Yeah. Like people out there are into it. They are. Yeah. It's the second fastest growing division in USPSA. Really? Yeah. Carry optics is number 1. And then PCC is number 2. Okay. And it really, like, you can take any beginner out there and instead of putting them behind a pistol, put them behind an AR. It's more user friendly. Right. You get more points of contact. Yeah. And they're going to have a great time. And then you get them hooked, right? It's about, well, you saw it when you went and shot 3 gun. It's getting people out there in a match where they can have a good time, get them, firearms and ammo that's going to run great, and just let them go. And once they do it, they're hooked, and they're buying guns before they even left the match, apparently.
I did that.
Yeah.
No regrets.
Nope. Not at all. So, yeah, it's a good time.
I mean, I've never met anyone that didn't fall in love with pulling the trigger. So,
I know. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's your next PCC? Do you know?
My next PCC match? So I'm going to shoot a lot of locals.
Okay.
And my next big match will be September in Arizona. It's the Arizona JP PCC Championship.
Okay.
And then from there, I will go to PCC Nationals. But the whole goal really behind all this is going from unclassified in USPSA to being a grandmaster by January 1st.
0 to hero, right?
Yeah, 0 to hero in 6 months. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like there's sometimes I do some stuff. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a lot. This one, I sit there every day and I'm like, oh, I bit off a lot on this one. It's a lot of work. Yeah. It's a lot of dry fire. It's been a lot of live fire. And then just trying to go through and document everything and keep track of it and know exactly what's going on and talking to people and sending my match footage to people to look at, or my dry fire, or even some of my just range footage and having them critique me. It's been a lot of work.
Yeah. But people in the community have to be receptive to that. Like they have to love it, right?
Yeah. I have a lot of friends that are loving it. Corey K, who it was his match. He squatted up with me and I got done shooting stage and he's like, do you want me to critique you while you're shooting? Like after your stage? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, you're running like a ballerina out there. And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, you're on your tippy toes coming into position. He's like, that probably cost you like 4 seconds to settle. He's like, you need to come in low. And then I came off another stage and everybody's like, oh, you shot great. And I was like, thanks. And he's like, your splits were horrible. You're super slow. Like, I think he's enjoying it more than he should.
Right. Like just destroying you.
Yeah. And then, of course, so like I came in, he's like, oh, your splits are super slow. And I was like, cool. He's like, you need to be shooting this. And I was like, okay. So the very next stage when I got that penalty, that buzzer went off. And I was like, all I was thinking about was like, go fast, go fast, go fast. And that first shot, I was like, yeah. Well, the first shot was on target. Second shot was not because I was gripping the rifle. I was trying to manipulate the rifle more than I should because I was trying to go faster. And so it took me a stage to settle down.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, for the most part, everybody is enjoying it. I have people that have called and reached out to me. They want me to come out and have range sessions with them so we can just train together and work on PCC. So it's been fun. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's easier to like help you out when you're in person.
Yeah.
Versus watching a video, right?
Right. And I think a lot of people know when I show up, I'm bringing like multiple cameras too. So
that's true.
They can get footage out of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You're online. Where can people find your videos at?
So it's 2A_Dustin on Instagram. And I don't know my YouTube because I don't pay attention that much to my YouTube until now. But if you go to my Instagram, it'll link you to my YouTube.
Instagram, y'all. That's awesome. If someone wants to get into PCC, what advice do you have for them?
Just find a local range. Go online, find a local range that has PCC, whether it's through USPSA, IDPA. There's even Max Legrandis has his own organization of shooting that you can. It's PCSL, so you can reach out to all of them, email them, go online, check them out, YouTube, or Instagram, whatever it is. They'll tell you where some local matches are, and I suggest just showing up because there's always somebody there that will have a rifle for you to run. Like I'm traveling to all the matches with a demo.
Yeah.
So it's like demo / backup. So if my rifle was to go down, I have another one. But at this last match, I loaned it out to some other guy, and he shot the entire match for his first time shooting PCC.
With your demo?
Yeah.
Did he show up without a gun, and he was just like, hey, man?
He shot the morning with a rifle.
Okay.
And then he was like, all right. And so I was like, yeah, here's PCC. Go shoot. Go have fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I really I've always been the guy that's like, show up. What will happen is you can watch the entire match, and at the end of the match, somebody's going to be like, here's a rifle. Let's go shoot a stage and get you hooked. And then after that, you start bonding and talking to everybody, and they'll be inviting you back to matches. There'll be plenty of demo rifles for you to run, and you'll have a good time.
Yeah. I've said it once, I've said it a million times, but the 3-gun PCC competitive shooting world is the most welcoming community that I've ever seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like they want you to be there, and they want you to love it as much as they do.
Yeah, we want to grow the sport. We want to help people, just truly understand firearms, and that they're not this big, dangerous, thing out there. Like there's a lot of fun that can come from it, a lot of education. There's just the firearm industry in general, whether you're shooting competitions and working with companies, or you're just shooting competitions and hanging out with people that are in the industry. It doesn't matter. Like, everybody's there to have a good time, and before you know it, they'll become your family. And you can travel all over the country and make pit stops somewhere and hang out with somebody you met 3-4 years ago at a match.
One time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, safety in knowing how to handle a firearm.
There is.
Like, action shooting, you handle firearms probably way more than your average Joe. So, and I would trust you with a gun before I would trust, a random person with a carry concealed on the street. So
yeah. The one thing I always like to say is, like, every time a projectile leaves your firearm, your lawyer's number's attached to it. Like, no matter what, right? The more you get out there and train with it, the more proficient you're going to become with it. But also the more you're going to appreciate actually what you have, and that safety factor of it is going to go up. So
it comes with it.
Yeah. So just get out and shoot. Have a good time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for coming out here and being with us today.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me.
We'll probably be on again. So
let's do it.
Fan favorite. Well, there you have it, guys. Remington is on the rise. Like, comment, subscribe, and be sure to share this podcast with your hunting or shooting buddies. Make sure to follow Dustin here on Instagram at 2A_Dustin. Thanks for listening.